comparing the EU with the Soviet Union. Come on, if Brussels were Moscow, we would have tanks from the EU in London right now. We don't. We don't. On the contrary, I am struck by the fact that a number of the laws that you are passing in your country find their inspiration in Putin's Moscow, which is hardly anyone's dream, right? No, I really don't understand you, because you have a privilege. You enjoyed twice an overwhelming majority. Your people trusted you. And I just imagine, you might laugh at me, but if my party would enjoy a two-thirds majority in any member state, well, 3 times, okay, I agree. Well, I would not be afraid of an independent press, because it would stimulate the public debate in the country and mobilize the collective intelligence that we need. I would not be afraid of a strong and independent judiciary, because checks and balances is what we need in democracy. I would not be afraid of a vibrant civil society, because it would help me spotting problem areas that I need to solve. I would not be afraid of leading-edge universities, because they would nurture talent in my country. And I would say, even better if some of the funding comes from abroad, because it enriches my country. It's not just that I wouldn't be afraid of these things. I would cherish them, because I think they would help me delivering a better society for my citizens. So really, what are you afraid of? I might tell you, a bit like Guy Verhofstadt said, that, well, since Hungary enjoys the financial solidarity of the EU, and rightfully so, it should abide by all the obligations of the EU. Yes, but this is not the first reason. The first reason is, well, do these things, be an open society, because it's good for Hungary. Hungary will be stronger. Hungary will be a better place for its people by having a diversified free press, strong democratic checks and balances, a vibrant civil society, and leading-edge universities. I'd like to conclude with one thing, the refugee issue. And of course, you expected me to do that. Mr. Orban, I must say that we are utterly appalled at the way your country has been treating refugees. True enough, Hungary sits in an uncomfortable situation at the outer border of the EU. But instead of directing your anger at refugees themselves, you should direct your energy towards your fellow EU member states so that help you welcoming them. Mr. Orban, and you did it again today, you often refer to the Christian values. Well, I must tell you one thing. As a Christian, I find nowhere in the gospel that the stranger should be locked up and sent back. What I read there is that we should welcome and protect. Thank you very much.
On behalf of the EFDD, I give the floor to Mr. Farage.
Well, Mr. Orban, not for the first time. You sit here as the democratically elected leader of a great nation, and you stand up and make a reasoned argument as to how the Hungarians do things and how actually there are different cultures within Europe. And you're prepared again and again to come back here and to be attacked and abused by non-entities who want Hungary to bow to their will and not to the will of the Hungarian people or its leader. And I'm beginning to wonder, at what point, sir, do you, as an intelligent man, stop banging your head up against a wall? You spoke today and you behaved today as the leader of a nation. But isn't it becoming obvious that as a member of the European Union, actually you are not a nation? Just as we're seeing in France at the moment, with huge interference in the French presidential election, even with the unelected Commission now coming out and backing this godlike creature called Macron. No, you're not the leader of a nation. And these people will go on interfering in the lives of Hungarian people. And you'll never be forgiven. You are a sinner in their eyes, not just because you want to close down George Soros' propaganda machine that masquerades as a university. Nothing to do with that. It's because you won't pay the price for Mrs. Merkel's supreme folly and sign up to migrant quotas, and they will never, ever forgive you for it. Surely, when you yourself have said in the past, we need to get rid of a utopia called supranational Europe, it must become clear to you, as it became clear to Eurosceptics in the United Kingdom, this set of organisations bound by their treaties are not open to reform. Institutions like this are led by fanatics. They are turning this into a state, and the nation state cannot coexist alongside. Now, you were bold enough to call a referendum on the migrant quotas, and 88% of those that voted agreed with you. Surely logic says it's time you gave the Hungarian people a referendum on whether they stayed part of the European Union or not. Who knows? You might come and join the Brexit club, and then we could fight, for a nation of democratic states working together, trading together, and put this nonsense behind us.
On behalf of the ENF, I give the floor to Mr. Salvini. Thank you, President. Now, it seems to be that 500 million Europeans are governed by puppets and bureaucrats. Now, whilst terrorists are shedding blood in Europe, what we're worrying about now is taking Hungary to court. Mr. Orban, stand tight. They're worrying about the Roma, the supposed fictitious refugees, the billions of Soros and the government. Now, the Hungarians have a single flat rates tax of 16%. In Hungary, corporations pay 9%. Unemployment has fallen to 4%. Youth employment, 11%. Retirement at the age of 62. The Hungarian people and government have been strong enough to defend and protect their own currency, their central bank, their borders. What are we doing? Are we going to send in the tanks like in 1956? Are we going to use sanctions then instead of missiles? I remember that some Europeans of today that are in favour of the EU and Macron, Giorgio Napolitano, for example, former president of Italy, when the Soviet tanks invaded Hungary, proud like today, they talked about Hungarians as fascists, and they called on the tanks to come in to safeguard peace in the world. But it seems nothing's changed in those 6 years. Instead of the tanks, you're using the banks, finance, and an invasion of immigrants, so-called fake refugees, and then unscrupulous financiers like Soros, maybe financing some of the people here in this parliament or in this commission. So instead of taking Poland and Hungary to court, try to think about the 20 million unemployed Europeans and protect our borders, Commissioner. You, a member of the party of the same group who said that Southern Europeans spend money on alcohol and women, and I think you should be ashamed of yourselves. You should respect the Prime Minister who's been voted on by the Hungarians. You should stop getting involved on behalf of Macron. Leave the French to vote for themselves. Now, on behalf of the Italians, thank you very much for what you're doing. Thank you for what you've done and what you will do. Thank you for resisting the Soviet EU diktats. Long live Hungary. Now give the floor to Balco.
President, thank you. Jobbik, as a member of Jobbik in the European Parliament, in the debate on the government of Hungary, my position is always determined by the actual case. Therefore, I was against, for instance, the quota of migrants, and I was in protection of the Hungarian government policy. Like I did in 2015, I was the only party back then to do this. Jobbik is against Mr. Soros. We are against the ideology of open society. Nevertheless, to pull the plug on the CEU is done by the government by an authoritarian decision, which is an unacceptable precedent. We cannot accept it. We do not await a solution from the EU, but rather from the Hungarian Constitutional Court. Therefore, in Hungary, in the Hungarian Parliament, Jobbik Party proposed a decision by the Constitutional Court. The real solution will be brought about in next year's parliamentary elections in Hungary. We're against this corrupt regime of this government.
Given the importance of the debate, I've been quite flexible about the timing allocated to the group leaders to allow them to express their positions. But now, with the remaining speakers in the debate, given that we're also going to have a catch the eye, can I ask you please to stick to time allocated to you? First of all, Mrs. De Lange, 1 minute.
Yes, and I understand you start being strict with me, so I will try very hard. But I stand here with pain in my heart in this debate. Pain in my heart because I also know the other Hungary and the other Fidesz, I have to say. The Fidesz that was born in opposition to communism, and the Fidesz that participated in the pan-European picnics, showing that it wanted to overcome communism and become part of a Europe that stands united. Yet we need this debate here in this room today, because not for the first time, and yet again, developments in Hungary seem to run counter to our values and to what we stand for. Everything we fought for in 1989. Freedom of education, non-discrimination, the principle of sincere cooperation. And it's a good thing, I say to Frans Timmermans, that the Commission is working on this. But the real question, of course, lies with you, Mr. Prime Minister. Are you really the kind of man that needs to paint an incorrect and exaggerated picture of Brussels as the enemy, only to look stronger at home? Is your place among the autocratic leaders we see in our neighbourhood, like Putin or Erdogan, or do you belong to a Europe based on the core values that you yourself fought for in '89? The choice is yours, but so are the consequences. Thank you very much.
Sono stato flessibile.
Well, I was flexible with you too.
La parola.
Thank you. Dear Prime Minister, I'm from your neighbouring country, Slovenia, and I have many friends in Hungary. We together dreamed to be part of an open Europe, and today I share my deep worries with them. The current government's campaign against the NGOs is unacceptable. We cannot just sweep out the civil society. In current national consultation, Let's Stop Brussels, the name tells it all, you portray NGOs as a threat to the national interests. With hundreds of NGOs across Europe, we urge you to withdraw the proposed bill, and we urge you to respect the academic freedom and autonomy and suspend the discriminatory changes to the higher education legislation. I ask also my EPP colleagues to understand it's high time the Commission formally triggers its rule of law framework with Hungary. We have to defend the people of Hungary from the corrosion of the fundamental values. And Mr. Orban, I'm very sensitive to European migration policy. Do not imprison people fleeing for their lives to Europe in container villages behind razor blades. It's a shame for Europe. Thank you.
Ms. McAvey.
Thank you. Yes, as President Manfred Weber said, this debate is not about George Soros. It's about what happened in Hungary and what you do, Mr. Orban. However, I will also recall that in 1989-90 you benefited from a Soros scholarship at a college in Oxford, and you studied liberal political philosophy. Now let's come back to the present time. Academic freedom is cancelled in Hungary, and we ask it back. Your attack against EU and other foreign universities, against civil society, is a brutal attack against free-minded education and free-minded people. We cannot tolerate this in the European Union. A month ago, Putin forced the closure of the European University in St. Petersburg. Shortly after, you did the same inside the European Union. I do not believe this is a coincidence. I believe it is a coordinated plan against free-minded and democracy. So, Prime Minister Orban, come back to values and to Europe.
Thank you, Chair. I would actually like to use my minute not to debate with Mr. Orban, who's probably not going to be convinced anyway. He once said that his big examples were Putin and Erdogan, and indeed he's a very good copy of that. However, I would like to address the European Commission. I very much welcome the steps that have been taken by Mr. Timmermans. I also recognise the limited instruments available, but I think we should all recognise, and I would also like to ask Mr. Weber to recognise, that we are not talking about single issues here. We should address this in the systematic nature of the problem, the systematic destruction of the democratic rule of law and fundamental rights. We should also recognise the contagion that is taking place to Poland. So if we fail to recognise that systematic nature, then we fail to preserve the integrity of the European Union. And therefore, I think it is high time that we launch the Article 7.1 procedure, and I hope that this House is going to vote for it. Thank you.
Mrs. Verja.
Thank you very much indeed, President. Democracy, which is illiberal, that's the new Hungarian model. And that's what we've seen progressively and systematically bringing down of other forms of power, media, justice, education and NGOs. And the Stop Brussels consultations is a mark of that as well. And the law on the NGOs. Yes, it's on the base of Russian law, but it's not about transparency, it's about suspicion. When it comes to immigration, you wonder if asylum rights actually exist in Hungary. The Geneva Convention is no longer respected. There are systematic detentions, including of minors. There's a building of a wall at the border with Serbia, which is now going to be electrified. And there are also snipers on the border. And then there are all kinds of whipping boys being used as well. There's an absence of action from the part of the European Commission since 2015, and Mr. Avramopoulos has been silent on this as well. Now, Mr. Timmermans, finally the Commission has decided to open infringement proceedings against the Hungarians, and that should be put to the vote at the next Hungary plenary part session. We cannot play these games, Mr. Orban, particularly in a country with a history like Hungary's.
Onorevole Sargentini.
Mrs. Sargentini.
Dank u, voorzitter.
Thank you very much indeed, President. Prime Minister, the newspapers have been silenced, refugees have been locked up, and your regime really needs enemies to stay in power. That's true for scientists, students, political activists and Europeans. And it reminds me of the poem from the Second World War when they arrested the communists. I was silenced because I wasn't a communist. But, Mr. Timmermans, and I'm speaking to you now, we can't expect Mr. Orban to suddenly improve his democracy track record. No, we have to make sure that the Commission acts now, and Article 2 proceedings have to begin, yes, in Council, but you can begin with Article 7 now without getting a mandate from the Council, so please go ahead and do that.
President, Prime Minister Orban, supposedly today we are discussing your new university law in Hungary, but we all know that's not what it's about. It's about Hungarian defiance, the Hungarian way. Hungary is opposing Brussels centralism and wishes to preserve its national independence. Hungary is opposing Muslim mass migration and wishes to maintain its Christian Western culture. Hungary is opposing the left-leaning zeitgeist and wants just to remain Hungary. Since the 13th of November 2015, France has been in a state of emergency. Stockholm is now the world capital of rape. Now, if I had to decide between the French, Swedish and Hungarian way, then I would choose the Hungarian way. Please stand firm, Mr. Orban, you are a rock in the storm.
Ms. Morvai.
Non...
I said that what is the point of order? Or what is the item on the agenda?
Facts when she accuses Sweden and Stockholm in a way to be the capital of rape in this house.
This is a debate.
Please, this is an insult.
It's a free debate.
La parola all'onorevole Morvai.
I give the floor to Mrs. Morvai.
Dear colleagues, we Hungarians are well known for being the lovers of freedom. We always seek autonomy in the history. If we hear, even if we hear the word liberty, our hearts start to beat. So we can be mobilized for matters like freedom of education, freedom of research, or freedom of speech, freedom of the media that can mobilize us very well. But it's a vicious thing that you barter a massive migration under the masquerade of freedom. We don't want migrants. We reject them. You should understand that. And also Hungarians should pay attention to this outrageous scheme that you couple freedom to the migrant issue. Migrants you call asylum seekers. So you try to force Hungary to accept migrants. And we should pay attention that many people in Hungary demonstrate for civil liberties, freedom of education. Of course, we accept that, but immediately there is another poster, pull down the fences. That is how you couple one thing to the other, and it's an outrageous scheme. We want freedom, dignity, human rights, yes, but en masse migration, no.
Onorevole Metsola.
Mrs. Metsola.
Thank you. Member state representatives come here to stand up for their policies. That is their prerogative. But mine is to stand up for the Europe I believe in. European Union is not a pick-and-choose entity. It is a collection of states that share the same intrinsic value system and that believe in sincere cooperation with each other. When higher education institutes are targeted and vast sums are spent on disingenuous campaigns to stop Brussels, this runs contrary to the values we believe in. Pandering to populists at the very time when the world needs the opposite is not our way. I am a proud member of the EPP. We believe in a Europe of freedom of thinking, of freedom of speech, and we will always defend those values whenever and wherever they are under threat, whether it is corruption in Malta by the socialist government, the watering down of the rule of law in Romania, institutions under pressure in Poland, or what is happening in Hungary. This is what we stand for. Our values have stood the test of time, and they are not up for negotiation, not now and not ever.
Thank you. 1 minute, Mr. Niedermüller.
Thank you. To some extent, I sympathize with you. It must be difficult to live a life like yours, always in anxiety, always looking for enemies. You're afraid of democracy, from open society, from debates, from the European Union, from migrants, from NGOs, independent media, from free education. You're afraid of every single item on which Europe has been built after World War II. And you're not only systematically undermining liberties, but you betray the fundamental interests of the Hungarian society. You want to turn Hungary into a second Russia. But the people in Budapest streets under European flags do not want that. You want to stop Brussels, although you should be stopped, because your illiberal democracy is based on enemies, lies, corruption, and embezzlement of public funds. But by now, you and your politics has been got into a blind alley. Even your fellow party members do not support you. And we will never leave Hungary to walk alone.
Mr. Javor, 1 minute.
Tisztelt Timmermans úr és
Vice President Timmermans, Mr. Manfred Weber. We are talking about Hungary. Not for the first time, and I'm afraid not for the last time. Lex TEU, the NGO bill, the Stop Brussels campaign. Viktor Orbán has crossed another line. Again, not the first line he has crossed in recent years. The Commission hasn't been doing much, and the EPP has been defending him. Maybe you thought that active protests from the Commission would only make things worse, and it's better if the EPP keeps Orban under check within the party. You are not right, but you have the responsibility. Your passivity has only been oil to the fire, and the EPP's protection has legitimized all that he's done, all that he's doing. You have betrayed all those Europeans who believe in a Europe which is more than just a common market. It's a union of values and rights and principles. It's time to prove and beside these people.
Madame Bush for 1 minute.
Tisztelt kollégák, tisztelt...
Dear colleagues, dear members, before I became an MEP, I was a high school professor in the Ukraine, in an institution which was always to be closed down, but it was never on the headlines or a cover page of the New York Times. So therefore I understand that the CEU outrage is not about academic freedom, but it is a matter of double standards. When the minority education is at stake, why don't you raise your voice then in other countries? The amendment of the Hungarian higher education law is not aiming at closing down the CEU, but to render the regime more transparent. And every country has the right to do this. The incorrections found by the education ministry was only rejected by the CEU, not by other universities. Why can't we have an objective debate on the matter with the CEU? You shouldn't be one-sided and prejudiced. You should listen to both parties when making decisions.
Madam Costa, 1 minute.
Thank you, President. Vice President Timmermans. With the 60th anniversary of the treaties and the 30th of Erasmus, it's a significant time. And finally, our request has been taken on board by the Commission to take a first step to engage infringement procedures against Hungary, having violated Article 2 of the treaty, as well as 13 and 14 of the Charter of Fundamental Rights. After the petition signed by thousands of Hungarian and international academics and others, yesterday we met with a colleague who confirmed that the law is undermining the existence of the CEU. It's the director who came to speak to us yesterday, Michael Ignatieff. This law is going to put such constraints as to block the activities of the CEU and no longer make it possible for students to sign up. This is yet another violation of human rights, as with asylum seekers, the wall, the curbs on the media, the constraints on the NGOs, and the unacceptable Stop Brussels campaign. I do hope that our principles will be respected.
Prime Minister, thank you for being here, and also thank you for writing to me recently. A couple of years ago, we started off with a constitution, media freedom, retirement age for judges. We've witnessed several unspeakably worded national consultations in the meantime. We've witnessed a vague idea to reintroduce the death penalty, and all that coming from a man who is constantly referring to Christian values. It escapes me, Prime Minister, where the death penalty would be on any Christian agenda. And I've rarely found any Christian theologian who would have been able to find anything good about the death penalty. And now it's about a university, it's about NGOs, it's above all about the next national consultation. The NGO thing, Prime Minister, is not about transparency, as we all know. It is in order to label NGOs that are foreign funded as foreign, because they might carry foreign influence into Hungary, and foreign influence is bad. Now, the only thing that comes to mind to me in all this context is, if all foreign influence is so bad, why do you accept the payment of 5 billion euros annually as the big net recipient of European structural funds in order to plaster the whole country with the posters in which you call Brussels crap? Somebody who does that, Prime Minister, leaves the Union out of their own accord.
And now, Mr. Juhey, for 1 minute, please.
Thank you, European Democrats on one side and Mr. Orban, Prime Minister Orban, on the other side. A betrayal, shame. This is the same person who in '89 received the Soros scholarship. The same '89 Viktor Orban would be ashamed of today's Viktor Orban, who has betrayed democracy, the values, the principles that you represented back in the day. But what's even worse, how shameful to all of us Hungarians that once again we stand here, Hungary at the agenda. This is treason. Whatever you say, whatever the press you finance says, this is treason. 28 years ago, you took part in overthrowing the Stalinist party, and now you're building a new Putin-type nationalistic state. What has happened in the meantime? We don't know. One thing is for sure, we have to do something about it. We have to act against this. Dear members, please do look at the rule of law in Hungary, but don't punish us just yet, because punishment is required not for the Hungarian people, but Mr. Orban. We will get rid of him and bring Hungary back to Europe and European values.
1 minute, Mr. Shogar.
Because we're talking about university, the CEU, and that's one of the occasions why Hungary is discussed now. I'd like to call the attention to Romania, that there is a very important higher education institution in Târgu Mureș. There's a medical university, which according to the 2011 education law in Romania is a multicultural university. So there should be an independent Hungarian department within the university, but it has never taken place in the last 6 years. But no one is worried about this in the Romanian government, nor in the Council of Europe, or in the EU. I raised my voice several times in that matter, but this particular university and this particular country is not so interesting as the CEU and Hungary. I think European institutions should be more consequent in demanding the rule of law in every member state.
Mrs. Gall, 1 minute, please.
Today's attacks against our Prime Minister and Hungary is clearly due to our position on migration. We have been saying the same thing for 2 years. We were the first and only one in Europe. And the same position is now present in EPP documents. Just look at the documents approved in Malta. We can only guarantee the security of European citizens if we protect the external borders of Europe, and if we decide who we let in and how many of them we allow in. We really have to make a distinction between economic migrants and real refugees, and we have to tackle the root causes of migration, and we have to have them stay where they are. These are the clear positions of Hungary that put us on the agenda again. But Hungarian citizens and the Prime Minister only want what every European wants, to live in a secure and prosperous Europe. This is our responsibility and duty to ensure that people feel safe here in Europe. It is sad and shameful that people like Verhofstadt preach to us, and people even clap their hands when they hear these words.
Thank you, colleagues. We now move to Catch the Eye, and I will take 5, which is what I'm required to do, but there are lots of colleagues who will be very disappointed, and I regret that that is the case. So our first speaker for 1 minute, Madam Šojdrová.
Paní místopředsedkyně za
Thank you, Madam Chair, for giving me the floor. Prime Minister Orban, I would like to ask you a question. You recommend us to consult our citizens more often. Have you consulted the modification of the law on universities with your citizens? Because what you propose is disastrous for them. Hungary can make a choice, of course. It can choose the conditions of working of their universities. But you know that 6 new legislative conditions, among other things, an agreement between Hungary and the US, this is nothing that you can do in 6 months. So if you want to improve conditions in education, if you want to introduce higher transparency, I agree with that. This is your right. But then please give all universities the possibility to meet those conditions. This is my request for you. Thank you.
Thank you. 1 minute, Mr. Lopez Aguilar.
Prime Minister Orban, if Hungary has been scrutinised by this Parliament once again. It's not because your country is a victim of the imaginary tanks of the Soviet or the EU. It's because this Parliament represents the European Union, which is the Parliament that accepted your country when it acceded to the EU and signed the Lisbon Treaty and agreed to the principles of freedom of information and other important principles. Now, there have been restrictions on people's rights, including those of foreigners and immigrants. Now, Article 7, Commissioner, this is about action to defend principles, and we have to do this without fear, because we have a vote in this House, and we've got to do something about the aggression of the Hungarian government.
Na początku tej kadencji parlamentu.
At the beginning of our term, also during a debate concerning Hungary, the Vice President of the Liberals said that it is not really about that law or other law, but it's about the direction in which the Hungary goes. And she said then, and I remember that very well, that she hopes that when it comes to Hungary, and then it turned out also against other countries, the Commission will be more bold and less legalistic. This is the definition of the rule of law. So be bold and be less legal when it comes to the countries, the political attitudes of which you do not like. So here we have this commission of Mr. Juncker and Mr. Timmermans. Yes, the freedom is being threatened more and more. But the freedom will prevail in Europe thanks to such countries as Hungary and Poland, thanks to such politicians as Mr. Orban. Congratulations.
Mrs. Lunacek.
Danke, Herr Präsident. Herr Premierminister.
President, Prime Minister Orban, you're here for the third time now to join in dialogue with us, I admit. Now, it seems this third time you want no dialogue. You don't really want to listen to us. You're just coming to us to tell us that we, the EU, are your enemy and opponent and you want to stop us. But only someone who feels weak and anxious would do that. And the laws that you have adopted in Hungary, trying to scrap pretty much the CEU or the NGO legislation, only someone scared of democracy and free universities or scared of civil society would do that. Only someone scared of criticism, to cut a long story short. Someone scared of democracy. Mr. Orban, I think you need to be stopped. That's the message from me to the Commission, to you, Vice President Timmermans. Finally, start up Article 7 and give the Council the alternative of either being clear or taking action. Now, the only ones applauding aren't your party, but the right-wing extremists. Not even the EPP are applauding anymore. I think it's time that we excluded Orban and Fidesz. Mr.
Thank you, Chair. The hypocrisy in this room is overwhelming. Most heads of political groups try to tell peoples and nations and governments what to do. Someone should explain to the Hungarian citizens why we're discussing fundamental rights in Hungary, why we are talking against their elected government. This University of Central Europe is funded, as well as many NGOs, by George Soros, who intervenes in the internal affairs of many states through these bodies. It is a right of all governments to protect their national interests and their citizens. And the European Union cannot stop them. I'd like to congratulate Mr. Orban because he judges according to the interests of his people. He's against the Islamization for their national identity and defends Hungary from the attempts of non-institutional actors to impose globalization. Thank you.
Si conclude così il Catch the Eye.
That concludes Catch the Eye. And Prime Minister Viktor Orbán, you now have the floor to answer the questions put to you by Parliament.
Köszönöm, elnök úr. Azt hiszem úgy illendő, hogy néhány fontos kérdésre válaszoljak.
Először is köszönöm mindannyiuknak ezt a vitát. Köszönöm, hogy figyelnek Magyarországra.
I thank you for paying attention to Hungary and for telling me your opinions. And also for those who supported our decisions. I specifically thank for those members of parliament who expressed their solidarity with Hungary. There were some Hungarian speakers. I do not want to assess the fact that some Hungarians are attacking their home country here in Brussels. I think we should have these views back home. To Mr. Verhofstadt, I have to say that it is my impression as though you would tell us Hungarians what we should do. I think you should entrust Hungarian voters to make decisions. They do so every 4 years. To Mr. Timmermans, I'd like to thank for his speech, and I thank you for offering us an open dialogue. We are ready to engage into a debate on every particular issue, and I think some of these issues will be easily resolved. I also have to respond to Mr. Pitella because I think he used a rather shrill tone when addressing me. Let me correct one of your ideas. Migrants do not want to go to Hungary. Migrants want to transit Hungary towards Austria, Germany, and Sweden instead. What we do is we protect Austria, Germany, and Sweden. We are observing the Schengen Treaty, and it's somewhat awkward that you, as a member of European Parliament, are slandering Hungary because we observe the Schengen Treaty, not primarily for our own sake, but for the sake of the Germans, Austrians, and Swedes. I think we should be rewarded for this rather than being defamed. The talks which try to instigate, try to turn the EPP against my party and myself, this is an old communist tactics. You want to slice up the EPP like a salami, as we say it in Hungary, so that you will become stronger. This is what happened in Hungary in the communist rule, and I would propose to the EPP not to accept this approach and these tactics. Our position in the migrant issue is totally clear. We have to stop illegal migration. The distinction between asylum seekers and migrants should be performed outside of the territory of the European Union, and people in trouble should be helped in the location where they are instead of bringing them into the EU. Who is not performing readmission and resettlement? Mr. Pitella, less than 10% has been resettled. It is not only Hungary which has not been participating. We only talk about 1,000 people in the Hungarian case. It is evident that the compulsory quota policy has failed. It is useless to push it further, because even countries which do not raise their voice against it like we do not implement it. If a policy has failed, you have to stop it and have to look for another solution. Let me talk about funds and finances. The money received by Hungary from the EU is not a gift. Cohesion policy is good for everyone. Every member state of the European Union benefits from the cohesion policy. Those who provide the funds are also get incomes from this. Net payers are also beneficiaries of the cohesion policy. Commissioners are openly talk about this. There are figures about this. What percentage of the funds are returned or reimbursed to the net payers? And I think it's right. We opened our markets, we dismantled our customs, and we opened our markets to capital. After the communism, we were poor as beggars. Nevertheless, we did so. I think without cohesion policy, there is no fair competition. You cannot request us, the members of parliament, to shut up, and you cannot address us as though we were be given handouts and we would be kind of on your bankroll and should behave accordingly. We cannot accept this. We have to reject such proposals. That Hungary would be an authoritarian political regime due to my personality, although we're not all Hungarians. Let me inform you that I spent 16 years in opposition in the Hungarian parliament, and I only started my 12th year in government. And I'm one of the few European leaders who, when lost elections, did not go back to a board of trustees or back to business and do not tour the world giving lectures in universities, but we stayed in politics even when we lost elections, and we stood up for a fight as in opposition, and we got back government. So if you allege us being authoritarian with such a track record, I think is not truthful, it's not fair. Ladies and gentlemen, I have a lot of ideas about Mr. Soros, but I don't think he has been given a stipend to anyone because he thought that by this you would buy the person's opinion for a lifetime. He never did so, and I have to reject this allegation. And you mentioned illiberal democracy. Well, as a matter of fact, in Central Europe, people believe if liberals do not win an elections, or not part of government, then there is no democracy. Well, we are fed up of this idea. Even if liberals lose elections, you still continue to have democracy in place. And liberal democracy is the one where not the liberals are in government.
Visto che il dibattito è aperto tra la Commissione e il Governo.
Given that the debate is open between the Hungarian government and the Commission, I give the floor to Vice President of the Commission, Timmermans.
At the conclusion of this debate, let me draw a few conclusions for the Commission. I will be looking forward to the reply by the Hungarian authorities to the notification we have sent on the law on higher education. In our view, this law is clearly in violation of EU law, so I hope we can get a response.